The video lasted only 45 seconds, but it cost Horizon Air $4 billion in a single morning. A man sits quietly in seat 4A, clutching his boarding pass. He isn't drunk, he isn't shouting. He is a paying customer on his way to the most important meeting of his life. But because a VIP passenger decided he wanted that specific window seat, security was called. What the airline didn't know was that the man they were about to drag down the aisle wasn't just a passenger. He was the one holding the pen that would sign their paychecks the very next day. This is the story of how arrogance met gravity, and why you never judge a book by its cover. The humid air of Miami International Airport clung to the windows of the terminal, but inside the first-class cabin of Horizon Air Flight 902 to New York, the air was crisp, cool, and smelled faintly of lavender and expensive leather. Elijah Banks adjusted his glasses and looked down at his watch. Deck 6:45 p.m. Perfect. If the flight left on time, he would be in Manhattan by 10, asleep by 11, and fresh for the 8 a.m. board meeting that would redefine his career. Elijah was a man of stillness. At 55, with graying hair, close-cropped, and a suit that cost more than most cars, he didn't need to be loud to be noticed. But today, he wasn't trying to be noticed. He just wanted to get home. He tapped the screen of his phone, reviewing a PDF document titled Project Titan Merger. He was the lead external auditor for the acquisition. In layman's terms, Elijah was the man who looked at a company's soul and decided if it was worth saving. "Champagne, sir?" Elijah looked up. A flight attendant, whose name tag read Sarah, smiled down at him. She looked tired, the kind of tired that comes from 3 consecutive cross-country shifts, but she was trying. "Just water, please, Sarah." "Thank you," Elijah said, his voice a deep, calm baritone. "Coming right up." As she walked away, a commotion erupted at the front of the plane. The heavy door to the jet bridge was still open, and a man stormed in, talking loudly into a cell phone. He was young, perhaps early 30s, wearing a linen blazer and sunglasses indoors. This was Carter Preston. Carter Preston was the son of a senator and the founder of a tech startup that hadn't turned a profit in 5 years, but still threw parties in the Hamptons. He radiated the specific kind of confidence that comes from never having heard the word no. "I don't care what the system says, just fix it," Carter barked into his phone, snapping his fingers at the purser. "You, my seat." "Where is it?" The purser, a woman named Joyce, who had been flying for 20 years and had lost her patience around year 15, checked her tablet. "Mr. Preston, welcome aboard. You're in seat 2B, aisle." Carter lowered his sunglasses. "Excuse me, I booked 4A. I always sit in 4A. It's my lucky seat. My feng shui consultant was very specific." Joyce tightened her jaw. "I apologize, sir, but 4A was booked weeks ago. 2B is a lovely seat. It has extra legroom." "I don't want legroom. I want my window," Carter snapped, ending his call and shoving the phone into his pocket. He pushed past Joyce and marched down the aisle, his eyes scanning the numbers. He stopped at row 4. Elijah Banks was sipping his water, reading a paragraph about Horizon Air's liability insurance. He felt a shadow loom over him. "You," Carter said. Elijah didn't look up immediately. He finished the sentence he was reading, marked the page, and slowly raised his head. "Yes?" "You're in my seat," Carter said, pointing a manicured finger at the headrest. Elijah checked his ticket, which was tucked into the seat pocket. 4A. "I believe this is my seat, young man." "Look, I'm Carter Preston. Google it. I need this seat. I have anxiety about aisle seats. I'll give you." Carter dug into his pocket and pulled out a wad of cash, tossing a $100 bill onto Elijah's tray table. "There. Buy yourself a nice dinner in New York. Move to 2B. The cabin went silent. Several passengers in the surrounding seats looked up. A woman in 4B, a tourist named Linda, widened her eyes. Elijah looked at the $100 bill, then at Carter. He didn't touch the money. "Mr. Preston," Elijah said softly, "I am comfortable here, and I do not require your money. Please take your assigned seat." Carter's face flushed a deep, ugly red. He wasn't used to resistance. He turned around and shouted toward the galley, "Attendant! Manager! Anyone! We have a problem here!" Joyce, the purser, hurried over, looking stressed. "Mr. Preston, please lower your voice." "This guy is squatting in my seat," Carter lied, loud enough for the economy passengers to hear. "I want him moved. Now. Or I'm calling my father, and you can explain to the senator why his son was harassed on your airline." Joyce froze. The mention of a senator was a trigger word for Horizon Air staff. The airline was currently under heavy scrutiny for declining service standards, and the regional manager had sent out a memo that morning. VIPs get what they want. No bad press. Joyce looked at Elijah. She saw a quiet black man in a suit. Then she looked at Carter Preston, the loud white son of a politician. She made a calculation. It was the wrong calculation. "Sir," Joyce said to Elijah, her voice taking on that sickly sweet tone of bureaucratic enforcement. "I'm going to have to ask you to switch seats with Mr. Preston." Elijah removed his glasses. "Excuse me?" "Mr. Preston has special status with the airline," Joyce lied, "and we need to accommodate his preferences to ensure an on-time departure. Seat 2B is open." "I paid full fare for this seat 3 weeks ago," Elijah stated, his voice remaining level. "I have a bad hip, and I specifically selected this seat for the support it offers against the bulkhead. I am not moving." "Sir, don't make this difficult," Carter sneered, leaning over Elijah. "Just get up." Elijah ignored him and looked directly at Joyce. "I am a paying customer. I have broken no rules. I am sitting in the seat assigned to me. Unless the plane is on fire, I suggest you ask Mr. Preston to sit down so we can depart." Joyce felt the pressure. She needed this plane in the air. "Sir, if you do not comply with crew instructions, that is a federal offense. I am ordering you to move." "That is not a lawful order," Elijah said calmly. "That is a preference based on his entitlement, not safety." Joyce turned on her heel. "I'm calling the gate agent." 10 minutes passed. The plane sat idle at the gate. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, apologizing for a minor passenger discrepancy. In the cabin, the atmosphere was poisonous. Carter Preston had taken seat 2B temporarily, but he was loudly complaining to anyone who would listen, calling Elijah stubborn and aggressive. Elijah remained perfectly still. He had reopened his laptop. He was currently typing an email to his own legal team, blind copying the board of directors of the company he represented. He didn't mention who he was to the crew. He shouldn't have to. Dignity shouldn't require a resume. 2 men entered the plane. One was a gate agent named Paul, a nervous man with a clipboard. The other was a private security contractor named Brody. Brody was large, wearing a tactical vest that looked ridiculous in a civilian airport, and he had been itching for a conflict all week. Paul approached row 4. "Sir, I'm the gate supervisor. We need to resolve this." "I agree," Elijah said. "Tell Mr. Preston to sit down." "Sir, the captain has authority over this vessel," Paul said, sweating. "We have decided that your presence is causing a disturbance. We need to rebook you on the next flight." "A disturbance?" Elijah raised an eyebrow. "I haven't raised my voice. I haven't left my seat. The only disturbance is the man in row 2 shouting about his father." You are refusing a crew member's request, Brody, the security guard, interjected. He stepped forward, flexing his hands. That's all we need to know. You're trespassing now. I have a ticket, Elijah said, holding up his boarding pass. This is a contract. The contract is void, Paul said, citing a rule that didn't actually exist. We are overbooked in first class due to technical restructuring. You have been selected to deplane. Selected, Elijah repeated. He looked around. Selected based on what criteria? Or was I just the easiest target? Sir, I'm going to count to 3, Brody said, moving into the row. The space was tight. You are making a mistake, Elijah said. He closed his laptop slowly. A very expensive mistake. Is that a threat? Carter Preston piped up from row 2. Did you hear that? He threatened them. He's dangerous. It wasn't a threat, Elijah said, looking at Brody. It was legal counsel. 1, Brody counted. Passengers were pulling out their phones now. Linda in 4B had her iPhone raised, recording everything. A teenager in row 5 was live streaming on TikTok. The red recording lights were like eyes in the darkness. 2, Brody said, reaching for his handcuffs. I will walk off this plane if you provide me with a written reason for my removal, and a refund right now, Elijah offered. It was a final olive branch. We don't negotiate with disruptive passengers, Joyce snapped from the galley. Just get him off, Brody. 3. Brody lunged. He didn't ask Elijah to stand. He grabbed Elijah by the lapels of his $3,000 suit and yanked. Elijah's glasses flew off his face, skittering across the floor. Hey, stop it! Linda screamed from the seat next to him. He didn't do anything. Back off, lady, Brody shouted. He wrapped his arm around Elijah's neck in a clumsy headlock. Elijah gasped. He wasn't a young man. The torque on his neck was painful. He tried to grab the armrest to steady himself, but Brody viewed this as resistance. Stop resisting, Brody yelled, driving his knee into Elijah's thigh. They dragged him. Literally dragged him. Elijah's legs bumped against the armrests of the aisle seats. His shoe came off. His laptop slid to the floor and was kicked aside by the gate agent. I can walk, Elijah wheezed, but they didn't listen. Brody and a second security officer who had just arrived hauled Elijah down the narrow aisle of the Boeing 737 like a sack of garbage. Elijah's face struck the side of a seat in row 10, cutting his lip. Blood trickled down his chin. The economy cabin was in an uproar. What are you doing to him? A mother yelled, shielding her child's eyes. That's a human being, a college student shouted, standing up to film a better angle. Carter Preston stood in the aisle of first class, watching the spectacle with a smug grin. As Elijah was dragged past him, Carter raised his champagne glass, which Joyce had just poured for him. Bon voyage, Carter mocked. Elijah, dazed, bleeding and humiliated, locked eyes with Carter for a split second. There was no anger in Elijah's eyes anymore. There was something much colder. It was the look of a man who had just decided to burn the world down, not with fire, but with paperwork. They threw him onto the jet bridge carpet. Brody dusted his hands off. Stay down, Brody said, panting. Your bags will be at the carousel. The heavy door of the plane swung shut. The lock clicked. Elijah lay on the dirty carpet of the jet bridge for a moment, listening to the hum of the engine spooling up. He touched his lip and looked at the blood on his fingers. He found his glasses in his pocket, cracked but functional. He put them on. He stood up, brushed the dust off his suit, and picked up his phone, which had miraculously stayed in his inner pocket. He didn't call the police. He didn't call his wife. He dialed a number memorized by fewer than 10 people in the world. It rang once. Yes, Elijah, a voice answered. It was Jason Pendleton, the CEO of the Titan Group. the conglomerate scheduled to buy Horizon Air at 9 a.m. the next morning. "Jason," Elijah said, his voice trembling with controlled rage, "we need to talk about the valuation, and I need you to authorize a short sell." "Where are you?" Jason asked, sensing the tone. "Are you in New York?" "No," Elijah said, watching the plane pull away from the gate. "I'm in Miami, and I have just been assaulted by the assets we are planning to purchase." "Assaulted?" "Jason," Elijah said, "turn on the news. In about 10 minutes, I'm going to be everywhere." While Elijah Banks sat in the airport's urgent care clinic, having a nurse apply a butterfly bandage to his split lip, the digital world was setting Horizon Air on fire. Linda, the woman in seat 4B, hadn't just recorded the assault. She had captured the perfect narrative arc. Her video, uploaded to Twitter with the caption, "Horizon Air security beats elderly man for VIP brat, Darashak's boycott Horizon," was 59 seconds of pure distilled rage. It showed everything. Carter Preston's smug face, the $100 bill, Elijah's calm refusal, and then the violence. The sound of Elijah's head hitting the armrest was sickeningly loud on the recording. At 7:15 p.m., the video had 500 views. At 7:30 p.m., a popular political commentator retweeted it. Views jumped to 150,000. By 8 p.m., while Flight 902 was cruising at 30,000 feet, the video had crossed 3 million views. Inside the Horizon Air corporate headquarters in Chicago, the public relations director, a woman named Jessica, was having dinner with her husband when her phone began to vibrate incessantly. She looked at the first notification, then the second. Her face drained of color. She dialed the emergency line for the Situation Room. "We have a code red," Jessica said, grabbing her purse. "Tell the social media team to shut down comments, now." But it was too late. The internet had already done its detective work. Reddit users had identified Carter Preston within minutes. His Instagram, which featured photos of him drinking champagne in what was clearly seat 2B of the very same flight, was flooded with thousands of hate comments. "Daddy's money can't buy class," one comment read. "Hope you enjoyed the seat. It's going to cost you your career." But the bigger revelation came at 8:45 p.m. A financial analyst on Twitter, who went by the handle Orwell Market Hawk, paused the video at the 0:12 mark. He zoomed in on the laptop Elijah had been holding. Market Hawk tweeted, "Wait a minute. I know that guy. That's Elijah Banks. He's the senior partner at Vanguard and More. He's the Grim Reaper of corporate auditing. Isn't Horizon Air supposed to be announcing a merger with Titan Group tomorrow? Banks is the lead auditor for Titan. Horizon just beat up the guy sent to buy them." That tweet was the spark that turned the fire into an explosion. Back in Miami, Elijah walked out of the clinic. He refused the wheelchair offered by the airport staff. He walked slowly, his body aching, his suit ruined. He hailed a taxi, not a limo. He sat in the back of the cab, the city lights blurring past him. His phone buzzed. It was Victoria, his personal attorney, and a woman known in New York legal circles as the Barracuda. "Elijah," Victoria said, her voice sharp. "I saw the video. Are you safe?" "I am," Elijah said. "Did you draft the injunction?" "Drafted, filed, and sent to a judge I played golf with last Sunday," Victoria replied. "I also have a private investigator pulling the records of the security contractor, Brody. Turns out he has 2 prior assault charges that were settled out of court. Horizon Air hired a liability." "Good," Elijah said. "And the stock?" "Aftermarket trading is already reacting to the video," Victoria said. "Horizon stock is down 4% in 20 minutes. But Elijah, do you want to settle this? They will offer you millions to make this go away before morning. Elijah touched his bandaged lip. He thought about the way Carter Preston had raised his glass. He thought about the gate agent's indifference. "No settlements," Elijah said softly. "I don't want their money, Victoria. I want their arrogance." "Understood," she said. "See you in New York." Elijah hung up. He looked out the window. He wasn't going to New York tonight. He had booked a seat on a competitor's airline for 5:10 a.m. He would be late to the meeting, but his tardiness would be part of the theater. The boardroom of Horizon Air was a glass-walled fortress overlooking the Chicago skyline. It was 8:00 a.m. on Tuesday. The table was mahogany, polished to a mirror shine. Bottles of sparkling water were arranged in perfect geometric lines. Douglas Renfrey, the CEO of Horizon Air, paced the room. He was a tall man with a fake tan and teeth that were too white. He had spent the last 10 years cutting costs, shrinking legroom, and charging for carry-ons to pump up the stock price for this exact moment. Today, the Titan Group was supposed to sign the acquisition deal for $4.2 billion. Douglas stood to make $60 million personally. He checked his watch. "Where are they?" "They're here," his assistant whispered. The doors opened. Jason Pendleton, the CEO of Titan Group, walked in. He was accompanied by 4 junior lawyers. Jason looked grim. He didn't shake Douglas's hand. He simply walked to the far end of the table and sat down. "Jason," Douglas said, forcing a smile. "Good to see you. Big day. We have the champagne on ice." Jason stared at him. "You haven't checked the news this morning, have you, Douglas?" Douglas frowned. "I've been briefing the board since 6. I heard about some viral video involving a passenger. My PR team is handling it. We offered the guy a travel voucher. It's a non-issue, just noise." "Noise," Jason repeated. "Look, let's get to the signatures," Douglas said, tapping the thick binder on the table. "The market opens in an hour. We want to announce the merger at the bell." "We are waiting for one more person," Jason said. "Our lead auditor. He has the final report." Douglas checked his watch again, annoyed. "Your auditor? Can't he just email it? Who is he?" "He prefers to deliver his findings in person," Jason said. At 8:15 a.m., the doors opened again. The room went silent. Elijah Banks stood in the doorway. He was not wearing his usual immaculate suit. He was wearing a fresh suit, but his face told the story. His lip was swollen and purple. A white butterfly bandage stood out against his dark skin. He walked with a noticeable limp, favoring his left leg. He carried a leather briefcase in one hand and his cracked glasses in the other. Douglas Renfrey stared. He looked at the bandage. He looked at the limp. Then, a horrible, cold realization washed over him. He recognized the face from the screenshots his PR team had sent him an hour ago. "My God," Douglas whispered. Elijah limped to the head of the table, opposite Douglas. He placed his cracked glasses on the mahogany surface with a soft clack. "Mr. Renfrey," Elijah said. His voice was raspy. "I apologize for my appearance. I had some difficulty with my travel arrangements yesterday." Douglas turned pale. He looked at Jason. This is the passenger?" "This is Elijah Banks," Jason said, his voice like ice. "He has been auditing your company for 6 months, and yesterday your staff dragged him off Flight 902 so a senator's son could have a window seat." "Mr. Banks, I had no idea," Douglas stammered. He stood up, reaching out a hand. "This is a terrible misunderstanding. We can fix this. We can—" "Sit down," Elijah commanded. It wasn't a shout. It was the voice of a man who owned the room. Douglas sat. Elijah opened his briefcase. He pulled out a single document. "Mr. Renfrey," Elijah began, "Section 14, Paragraph B of the Acquisition Agreement. the Material Adverse Change Clause. It states that Titan Group may withdraw from the deal if Horizon Air suffers a significant event that damages its brand reputation or financial standing by more than 10%. "This isn't 10%, Douglas argued, sweat forming on his brow. "It's one bad video. It'll blow over in a week." Elijah slid a piece of paper across the table. "This is a printout of your stock price in pre-market trading," Elijah said. "As of 10 minutes ago, Horizon Air is down 19%. Major institutional investors are dumping your stock. The hashtag #WatchBoycottHorizon is the #1 trending topic in the world. You aren't just damaged, Douglas. You are radioactive." "We can issue an apology," Douglas pleaded. "I'll fire the security guard. I'll fire the flight attendant." "You missed the point," Elijah said. "The culture of a company comes from the top. Your staff acted that way because they knew you prioritized VIPs over contracts. They were following your unwritten rules." Elijah looked at Jason. "Jason, my recommendation as auditor is that the assets of Horizon Air are toxic. The liability from the upcoming lawsuits, mine included, will be catastrophic. I cannot recommend this purchase." Jason nodded. He closed his folder. "You heard him, Douglas. The deal is off." "You can't do this," Douglas screamed, slamming his hand on the table. "We have a contract. I'll sue you." "Go ahead," Elijah said, calm. "But before you call your lawyers, you should know something else." Elijah leaned forward, wincing slightly from the pain in his ribs. "When I was lying on the jet bridge floor yesterday, I called Jason. We didn't just decide to kill the deal, Douglas." Jason picked up the thread. "We decided to short your stock. Titan Group bet against Horizon Air starting at 8 p.m. last night. Every dollar your company loses today creates profit for us." Douglas slumped back in his chair, defeated. The billions were gone. His $60 million payout had evaporated. "Now," Elijah said, picking up his cracked glasses, "if you'll excuse me, I have a civil lawsuit to file. I believe Victoria is waiting in the lobby with the papers. It's for $50 million, personal injury, emotional distress, and defamation." Elijah turned to leave, but stopped at the door. He looked back at the terrified executives. "Oh, and tell Mr. Carter Preston I said hello. I believe the FBI is looking into him for interfering with a flight crew. Federal felony. I hope he likes aisle seats in prison." Elijah walked out. The heavy doors clicked shut, sealing the tomb of Horizon Air. The destruction of Horizon Air did not happen all at once. It happened in a series of precise, suffocating legal maneuvers orchestrated by Victoria the Barracuda Hensley. 3 days after the incident, the deposition room in a downtown Miami law firm was freezing cold. This was a tactic Victoria loved. It made people shiver, it made them uncomfortable, and it made them want to talk just to get out of the room. Across the table sat Brody, the security contractor. He looked significantly smaller without his tactical vest. He was wearing a cheap suit that didn't fit, and he was sweating despite the cold. Next to him was a court-appointed lawyer who looked like he hadn't slept in a week. Elijah Banks sat in the corner, silent. He was still wearing the butterfly bandage on his lip. He didn't need to speak. His presence was a constant reminder of the violence. "Mr. Brody," Victoria began, placing a tablet on the table. "This is a sworn affidavit from the gate supervisor, Paul. In it, he states that you initiated physical contact without a direct order. He claims you were acting like a cowboy. Is that true?" Brody's eyes darted around the room. "That's a lie." Paul pointed at the guy. He said, "Get him off. That's an order." "Interesting," Victoria said. She slid a piece of paper across the table. "Because Horizon Air's corporate legal team just issued a statement. They are claiming you were a third-party contractor acting outside of their standard operating procedures. They are throwing you under the bus, Mr. Brody. They are going to let you go to prison for assault so they can save their stock price. Brody's face turned red. I was following protocol. The memo said VIPs get priority. The room went deadly silent. Victoria leaned in, her eyes gleaming like a shark that just smelled blood. What memo? Brody realized he had said too much, but anger took over. The memo, the Platinum Directive. It came down last month. It lists specific names, politicians, influencers, big spenders. It says if a Platinum passenger wants something, we make it happen. By any means necessary. That was the exact phrasing. Do you have a copy of this memo? Victoria asked softly. It's on my phone, Brody spat. I took a picture of it because I thought it was crazy, but I did what I was told. 2 hours later, that photo was on the front page of the New York Times. The Platinum Directive was real, and at the bottom of the page, signed in blue ink, was the signature of Douglas Renfrey, the CEO. The fallout was immediate and nuclear. The Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, announced an immediate audit of Horizon Air's safety and operational protocols. The Department of Transportation opened a civil rights investigation. But the hardest hit came from the passengers. A class action lawsuit was filed by the other passengers on Flight 902. They were suing for negligent infliction of emotional distress, claiming that witnessing the brutality against Elijah had traumatized them. Linda, the woman who filmed the video, gave an interview on Good Morning America. It wasn't just security, she told the host, wiping away tears. It was the culture. They treated that man like luggage because he didn't matter to them. And the worst part? The pilot didn't even come out of the cockpit. By Friday, Horizon Air's stock had plummeted 60%. They were being delisted from the S&P 500. The board of directors held an emergency meeting and voted unanimously to fire Douglas Renfrey without severance. But for Elijah, the victory wasn't in the stock price. It was in the apology. On Saturday morning, he received a handwritten letter from Joyce, the purser. She had resigned. The letter was short. Mr. Banks, I was scared for my job, so I sacrificed my humanity. I will regret that choice for the rest of my life. I am sorry. Elijah read it, folded it, and placed it in his desk drawer. He didn't reply. Some sins couldn't be washed away with a stamp. While the corporate structure of Horizon Air was collapsing under the weight of market forces, Carter Preston was attempting to ride out the storm in what he believed was an impregnable fortress, his penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park. For 4 days, Carter had not left the building. The golden boy of the Manhattan social scene, who usually thrived on the attention of flashbulbs and gossip columns, was now living like a fugitive in his own home. The curtains were drawn tight, blocking out the daylight, leaving the sprawling living room bathed in the artificial glow of 3 different television screens. Takeout containers from high-end sushi restaurants littered the marble countertops, the remnants of anxious, half-eaten meals. Carter paced the room, his phone clutched in his hand like a lifeline. He looked haggard. The linen blazer was thrown over a chair, replaced by a wrinkled T-shirt. He hadn't shaved, and his eyes were bloodshot from scouring the internet. He was furiously deleting comments on his Instagram. Delete, block, delete, block. It was a game of whack-a-mole he was destined to lose. For every comment he removed, 5 more appeared. Daddy's money can't buy class. Hope you enjoyed the seat. It's going to cost you your life. Boycott Preston. They're just trolls, Carter muttered to the empty room, his voice thin and cracking. It's a news cycle. It'll be over by Tuesday. People have short memories. He was trying to convince himself. He believed that the rules of the world, the ones that had always bent to his will, would eventually snap back into place. He was a Preston. His father was Senator William Preston. In Washington, that name was a shield that deflected lawsuits and scandals alike. On Sunday afternoon, the silence of the apartment was shattered by the ringtone of his phone. Carter jumped, his heart hammering against his ribs. He looked at the screen. Dad! A wave of relief washed over him, so powerful it nearly made his knees buckle. Finally, the cavalry had arrived. "Dad!" Carter answered, pressing the phone to his ear. "Thank God. Where have you been? I've been leaving messages for 3 days. Look, you need to call the FAA immediately. These people are crazy. They're talking about federal charges. You need to fix this." He waited for the reassuring, booming voice of the senator to tell him it was handled. He waited for the promise that the lawyers were already on the golf course with the judge. Instead, there was a long, static-filled silence. "Carter," the senator said. The tone was wrong. It wasn't angry. It wasn't authoritative. It sounded old. It sounded defeated. "Dad?" Carter asked, his grip on the phone tightening. "What's wrong?" "I'm holding a press conference in 45 minutes, the senator said slowly. "I am announcing to the press that I will not be seeking re-election for a 4th term." Carter froze in the center of his living room. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "What?" "Why? You're ahead in the polls by 12 points. You can't quit." "I'm not ahead anymore," the senator replied, his voice devoid of warmth. "The opposition released a new ad campaign this morning. It features your face, Carter. It plays that video on a loop, the moment you raised your champagne glass while that man was bleeding on the floor. The caption is simple. This is the legacy of Senator Preston. Is this the character we want in the Senate? So deny it, Carter stammered, panic rising in his throat. Say it's out of context. Say it's fake news. We can't deny video evidence, Carter. I am toxic, the senator said. I am politically radioactive because of you. I have spent 30 years building this name, and it took you less than 5 minutes to turn it into a punchline. Okay, fine, you're quitting, Carter shouted, pacing faster. I'm sorry, but what about me? You're my father. Fix my problem first, then you can retire. I can't fix it, the senator said. I spoke to the district attorney this morning. He's looking to make an example out of someone. The public is out for blood, and they aren't going to be satisfied with a security guard. You have to do something, Carter screamed, his voice shredding with hysteria. Call in a favor. You know everyone. I am doing something, the senator replied. The temperature in his voice dropped to absolute 0. I'm protecting the little bit of dignity I have left. I'm cutting you off, Carter. Carter stopped pacing. What? The trust fund is frozen, the senator stated with clinical precision. The credit cards have been cancelled as of 9 a.m. this morning. The lease on the penthouse is in a holding company's name. We are terminating it at the end of the month. You're 32 years old. It's time you learned how gravity works. You can't do that, Carter whispered. I have bills. I have a lifestyle. Goodbye, Carter, the senator said. Dad, wait. Dad. The line went dead. Carter stared at the phone, his hands shaking violently. He couldn't process it. It had to be a bluff, a scare tactic to teach him a lesson. He opened his banking app with trembling fingers. He tapped on his primary checking account. Status: frozen, pending investigation. He tried his credit card app. Card inactive. Contact issuer. Panic, cold and sharp, finally pierced his bubble of arrogance. It wasn't just a PR problem anymore. The floor had vanished. He ran to the window, pulling back the heavy drapes he had kept closed for days. He looked down at the street, 50 stories below. He expected to see the usual yellow taxis and pedestrians. Instead, he saw a cluster of black SUVs parked directly in front of the building. They weren't limousines. They were government vehicles, idling with intent. The buzzer to his penthouse rang. It wasn't the polite chime of the concierge. It was the harsh, insistent buzz of the unauthorized entry alarm. Carter backed away from the window. He looked at the intercom monitor mounted on the wall. The camera showed a man in a navy blue windbreaker. On the back, in bold yellow letters, were 3 letters that made Carter's blood run cold. FBI. Carter Preston, a voice crackled through the speaker. This is Special Agent Miller with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We have a warrant for your arrest under Title 49, United States Code, Section 465444. Interference with flight crew members and attendants. Open the door, or we will breach it. Carter stumbled back. He looked around his apartment, the modern art on the walls, the expensive Persian rugs, the view of the skyline he felt he owned. It was all slipping away like sand through his fingers. He had kicked a man out of a seat because he wanted a window. He had waved a $100 bill at a man who could buy and sell his entire existence. He had thought he was a god. Now he was just a suspect. He walked to the door, his legs feeling like lead. He unlocked it. Agent Miller stood there. He was a plain-looking man, unimpressed by the luxury of the hallway or the weeping man in the expensive T-shirt. He didn't smile. He didn't lecture. He simply spun Carter around and slapped the handcuffs on. They were tight, tighter than necessary, pinching the skin of his wrists. "You're hurting me," Carter whined, the entitlement dying hard. "I'm sure it's uncomfortable," Agent Miller said, pushing him toward the elevator. "But don't worry. You won't have to fight for a seat where you're going." The ride down the elevator was silent. Carter stared at his reflection in the mirrored doors. He looked small. As they walked him out of the lobby, the doorman, a man Carter had never bothered to learn the name of, held the door open. He didn't look Carter in the eye. He looked at the handcuffs, then looked away with an expression that wasn't pity. It was indifference. Outside, the world exploded. The paparazzi had been tipped off. Dozens of cameras flashed in unison, creating a blinding strobe effect. Reporters shouted questions, thrusting microphones past the police barricade. "Carter, do you regret it? Carter, what do you have to say to Elijah Banks?" Carter tried to hide his face, ducking his head, but with his hands cuffed behind his back, he couldn't shield himself. He was exposed. Somewhere in the crowd, a voice cut through the noise. It was loud, mocking, and clear. "Where's your feng shui now, Carter?" The crowd erupted in laughter. Agent Miller shoved him into the back of the waiting SUV. The leather seat was cold. The door slammed shut, muffling the noise of the crowd, but Carter could still see the flashes popping against the tinted glass. He slumped against the seat, closing his eyes, tears streaming down his face. The Prince of New York had fallen. That evening, hundreds of miles away, in a quiet study in Connecticut, Elijah Banks sat in a leather armchair. The room was warm, lit by the soft glow of a table lamp. A fire crackled gently in the hearth. Elijah held a porcelain cup of Earl Grey tea, the steam rising in delicate curls. On the television screen, the news was playing at a low volume. The anchor was detailing the events of the day. The screen showed the footage of Carter Preston being led out of his building, his head bowed, the FBI agents flanking him. Then a graphic appeared, showing the stock price of Horizon Air flatlining as the bankruptcy filing was confirmed. Elijah watched it all with a calm, detached expression. There was no joy in his eyes, but there was no pity either. He took a slow sip of his tea, savoring the warmth. He set the cup down on the coaster. He looked at the image of Carter Preston one last time, before picking up his remote to turn the television off. "Karma," Elijah whispered to the empty room, the silence settling around him like a comfortable blanket. "Karma is not a bitch. She is an auditor, and she always balances the books." 6 months had passed since the incident on Flight 902, and the world had moved on, as it always does. But inside the Federal District Court of Southern Manhattan, time seemed to stand still. It was a Tuesday in late January, and New York City was in the grip of a merciless winter. Outside, sleet lashed against the granite walls of the courthouse, turning the streets into rivers of grey slush. Inside, the heating system was working overtime, making the air in courtroom 4B thick, dry, and suffocatingly hot. It smelled of wet wool, stale coffee, and the sharp, metallic tang of anxiety. The courtroom was packed to capacity. Every bench was filled. Reporters from every major news network squeezed into the designated press areas, their laptops open, fingers poised to type the headline that would flash across screens in London, Tokyo, and Miami. Sketch artists worked furiously in the front row, their charcoal pencils scratching against paper, trying to capture the hollowed-out face of the defendant. Carter Preston sat at the defense table. To the public who had only seen the viral video or his old Instagram photos, he was unrecognizable. The Carter Preston of 6 months ago, the man in the linen blazer with the golden tan and the sneer of invincibility, was dead. In his place sat a ghost. He had lost at least 20 pounds. His suit, a dull charcoal grey off the rack, hung loosely on his frame, pooling slightly at the wrists. His hair, once styled with expensive products, was limp and grown out, tucked nervously behind his ears. He kept his hands clasped tightly in his lap, the knuckles white, trying to stop them from trembling. The silence in the room was heavy, broken only by the rustle of papers as Judge Margaret Hallowell took her seat. She was a woman of diminutive stature but immense presence, known in the circuit for her piercing intellect and her absolute intolerance for theatrics. She adjusted her reading glasses, the lenses reflecting the harsh overhead lights, and looked down from the bench. She didn't look at the lawyers. She looked directly at Carter. "Mr. Preston," Judge Hallowell said. Her voice was not loud, but it carried to the back of the room without a microphone. "We are here for sentencing on the charge of interference with flight crew members, a federal felony to which you have pleaded guilty." Carter flinched at the word guilty. He looked up, his eyes rimmed with red, darting toward the gallery behind him. He was looking for a specific face. He was looking for the silver hair and the reassuring nod of his father, Senator William Preston. But the seat reserved for family was empty. It remained a stark, wooden void in the sea of spectators. The senator had not come. He had not called. The distance between father and son was no longer measured in miles, but in poll numbers and political survival. Carter turned back to the front, a fresh wave of nausea rolling through him. He was truly alone. His lawyer, a high-priced crisis manager named Garrison, stood up. Garrison was sweating, dabbing his forehead with a handkerchief. He knew he was fighting a losing battle, but he was paid to fight it. "Your Honor," Garrison began, his voice smooth but lacking conviction. "We ask the court for leniency. We ask for a sentence of probation. My client is a young man who made a terrible, momentary lapse in judgment. He was under immense stress regarding his business. He has no prior criminal record. He has already suffered significantly in the court of public opinion." Garrison gestured vaguely to the reporters. "He has lost his company. He has been stripped of his assets. His reputation is destroyed. He has been vilified by millions. To incarcerate him now would serve no rehabilitative purpose. It would be purely punitive." Judge Hallowell listened, her face unreadable. She let the silence stretch out after Garrison finished, letting his words hang in the hot air until they seemed to wither. "Punitive?" the judge repeated softly. She picked up a file, the transcript of the flight recording. "I have watched the video, Mr. Garrison. I have listened to the audio," Judge Hallowell said, her tone sharpening. "I did not hear a man under stress. I heard a man who believed that his comfort was more important than another man's dignity. I heard a man who treated a fellow citizen, a grandfather, a professional, a human being, as an obstacle to be removed, like trash in a hallway." She leaned forward, her gaze locking onto Carter, pinning him to his chair. "You didn't just take a seat, Mr. Preston. You weaponized your status. You used your name as a cudgel to intimidate working-class employees into breaking the law for you. You created a situation where violence was the inevitable outcome of your entitlement." Carter looked down at the table, tears leaking from his eyes. He wasn't crying for Elijah. He was crying for himself. "Mr. Garrison argues that you have lost your privilege," the judge continued. "But the loss of privilege is not punishment, Mr. Preston. It is merely the leveling of the playing field. Welcome to the world the rest of us live in." The judge closed the file. The sound was like a thunderclap in the quiet room. "Carter Preston, please stand." Carter stood on shaky legs. He gripped the edge of the table to keep from collapsing. "It is the judgment of this court," Hallowell announced, "that you be sentenced to 18 months in a federal correctional facility." A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Carter's mouth fell open. 18 months. It felt like a lifetime. "Following your release," the judge continued, relentless, "you will serve 3 years of supervised probation. Furthermore, given the nature of your offense and the danger you pose to the safety of a commercial aircraft, you are hereby placed on the federal no-fly list for a period of 10 years. 10 years, Carter whispered, his voice cracking. "You wanted a seat so badly, Mr. Preston," the judge said, removing her glasses. "Now you won't sit on a plane for a decade. Take the defendant into custody." The gavel banged, sealing his fate. 2 U.S. Marshals moved in immediately. They were efficient and impassive. One of them took Carter's arm. They didn't drag him. There was no need. He had no fight left. They turned him around and pulled his wrists behind his back. The metallic click-click of the handcuffs was audible even over the murmurs of the crowd. As he was led toward the side door, Carter looked one last time at the empty seat in the front row. The reality crashed down on him. No one was coming to save him. The checkbook was closed. The heavy door clicked shut behind him, and the flashbulbs outside the courthouse erupted in a frenzy, capturing the image of a fallen prince. 2 weeks later, the air at JFK International Airport was crisp and bitingly cold. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue, the kind that only comes after a long storm. Elijah Banks stood on the edge of the private tarmac, his hands deep in the pockets of a thick wool coat. The wind whipped at his scarf, but he didn't move. He was staring up at the massive tail fin of a Boeing 737 parked at the gate. The plane looked different. The old Horizon Air branding, the aggressive orange and yellow sunburst that had become a symbol of corporate greed, was gone. The fuselage had been stripped and repainted. It was now a deep, lustrous navy blue. On the tail, painted in sleek silver, was a stylized shield emblem. It looked strong, protective. Titan Air was stenciled across the side in bold, authoritative letters. "It looks good, doesn't it?" Elijah turned his head. Jason Pendleton, the CEO of the Titan Group, was standing next to him. Jason looked tired but satisfied, like a general surveying a battlefield after the smoke had cleared. "It looks clean," Elijah corrected, his voice calm. "Clean is better than good. Good is a marketing term. Clean is an operational reality." Jason chuckled, his breath pluming in the cold air. "You're tough to please, Elijah. We bought the assets out of bankruptcy for pennies on the dollar, just like we planned. That $4.2 billion deal turned into a $900 million salvage operation. We saved the jobs of the ground crew, the pilots, the mechanics. We gutted the upper management. Every executive who signed that platinum directive is gone." "And the culture?" Elijah asked, looking back at the plane. "Paint is cheap, Jason. Culture is expensive." "We're rewriting the policy manuals from scratch," Jason said. "Customer service is being retrained. We're implementing a zero-tolerance policy for abuse, both from staff and passengers. But we need a leader who embodies that shift." Jason turned to face Elijah fully. The wind howled across the tarmac, but the space between them felt quiet. "The board voted this morning, Elijah." Elijah raised an eyebrow. "Voted on what?" "On the new chairman of Titan Air," Jason said. "We don't need another airline guy. We don't need a sales guy. We need a conscience. We need someone who understands the true cost of a mistake. Someone who values the contract over the quarterly earnings." Jason paused, his expression serious. "We want you, Elijah." Elijah looked at the man, then back at the massive machine of steel and aluminum. He shifted his weight, wincing slightly. His hip still ached when the temperature dropped, a permanent souvenir from a security guard named Brody. "I'm an auditor, Jason," Elijah said softly. "I find problems. I don't run airlines. I'm the guy who tells you your baby is ugly." "You fixed this airline before you even stepped into the office," Jason countered firmly. "You burned down the rot. You exposed the infection. Now, help us build something that lasts. You have the moral authority that no one else has." Elijah watched the activity on the ramp. A young family was walking up the mobile stairs to the jet bridge. The mother was struggling with a folded stroller and a toddler. A gate agent, wearing the new navy blue uniform, didn't wait to be asked. He rushed down the stairs, picked up the stroller with a smile, and helped the woman up. It was a small thing. Unscripted. Unforced. Elijah felt a tightness in his chest loosen. "All right," Elijah said, nodding slowly. "I'll take the chair. But I have one condition, a non-negotiable clause." Jason didn't hesitate. "Name it." "Seat 4A, Elijah said, "on this plane and every plane in the fleet." Jason looked confused. "What about it? You want it reserved for you?" "No," Elijah said. "I want it empty. Always. On every flight Titan Air flies, Seat 4A is not to be sold. We put a small brass plaque on the headrest." "A plaque?" Jason asked. "What should it say?" Elijah took off his glasses and wiped a speck of dust from the lens. He thought about the moment the security guard had grabbed him. He thought about the fear he had felt and the cold resolve that had followed it. It should say, "Dignity is not for sale." Jason was silent for a moment, processing the request. The revenue loss would be millions over the years. But he looked at Elijah, saw the set of his jaw, and understood. It wasn't about the money. It was about the compass. "Done," Jason said. "Consider it standard operating procedure." Elijah took a deep breath of the cold, jet fuel-scented air. It tasted different than it had in Miami. It tasted like possibility. "Then let's get to work," Elijah said, buttoning his coat. "We have a board meeting at 10. I want to review the liability insurance." He turned and walked toward the stairs, his limp barely noticeable now. He moved with the steady, unshakable rhythm of a man who had faced the storm, held his ground, and watched the world turn to meet him. The turbulence was finally behind him. The fall of Horizon Air wasn't caused by a market crash or a fuel shortage. It was triggered by the dangerous, arrogant belief that some people matter more than others. Elijah Banks didn't set out to destroy an airline that day. He just wanted to go home. But when pushed, he proved that the quietest man in the room is often the one you should fear the most. Carter Preston learned too late that money can buy a window seat, but it cannot buy immunity from the consequences of cruelty. In a world where cameras are everywhere, character is your only true currency. If you enjoyed this story of karma and justice, please hit the like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a story. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that what goes around comes around. Thanks for watching.